The force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of cosmic energy. For millennia, the Empire had expanded through that web, claiming world after world in the name of order and imperial law. But what happens when the web stretches beyond known space, when hyperspace lanes fold in ways no navicomputer has charted, and when something unprecedented pulls imperial eyes toward a discovery that will change two realities forever? Commander Thrawn, no relation to the infamous Grand Admiral, stood aboard the bridge of the Imperator-class Star Destroyer subjugator, watching sensor data that made no sense. His exploration fleet had been charting the unknown regions for 3 standard months, pushing beyond even the most remote hyperspace beacons, when the gravitational anomaly appeared. Not a black hole. Not a nebula. Something else entirely, a fold in space that their sensors couldn't properly classify. "Sir, hyperspace calculations are unstable," reported Lieutenant Ven, his voice tight with professional concern. "The navicomputer keeps rejecting the route, but there's definitely something on the other side. A massive gravity well. Multiple gravity wells, actually." Thrawn leaned forward, the dim blue lighting of the Star Destroyer's bridge casting shadows across his face. "How many?" 8 major bodies, sir. 1 G-type star. Multiple planets, several in the habitable zone." Ven paused, rechecking his instruments. "Sir, one of them is showing electromagnetic signatures. Artificial satellites. Thousands of them." The bridge fell silent. In the unknown regions, such discoveries were rare. Primitive civilizations, yes. Pre-spaceflight cultures, occasionally. But satellite suggested organized technological development, though clearly not advanced enough to have achieved hyperspace travel, or the Empire would have encountered them already. "Prepare a scout probe," Thrawn ordered. "We'll observe before making contact. Standard Imperial protocol." The probe launched, vanishing into the spatial anomaly with a flash of pseudo-motion. For 3 hours, the subjugator waited. When the probe returned, its data banks were full. Thrawn watched the holographic display materialize above the bridge's tactical table. A blue-green world rotated slowly, its continents clearly visible beneath swirling white clouds. Oceans dominated the surface. The planet was beautiful, and utterly alien to Imperial records. Population estimate, 8 billion sentient beings, Ven read from the probe's analysis. Humanoid physiology. Pre-hyperspace technology, but advanced enough for nuclear fission, satellite networks, and atmospheric flight. No evidence of force sensitivity in the population. No unified planetary government, sensors detected over 190 separate nation-states with distinct political boundaries. 190 governments. Thrawn repeated, incredulous. "For a single planet?" "Confirmed, sir. They appear to be in a constant state of low-level conflict. Multiple military alliances, economic blocs, and ideological divisions. The probe intercepted thousands of communication signals, radio, digital, primitive holonet equivalents. They call their world Earth. Earth." Thrawn rolled the word across his tongue. It meant nothing in BASIC, held no significance in Imperial records. This world existed outside all known star charts, impossibly distant from Coruscant, connected only by this inexplicable spatial fold. "Sir," Ven continued, "the probe's linguistic analysis identified over 7,000 distinct languages, though several dominant ones appear to facilitate international communication. The civilization is fragmented, technologically inconsistent, and resource-dependent on fossil fuels. They've barely begun exploiting their own solar system." Thrawn studied the rotating hologram. 8 billion beings. No hyperspace capability. Divided governments. Primitive weapons. By every Imperial standard, this was a world ripe for annexation. The Emperor himself would want to know about this discovery, a previously unknown human population, isolated from the galaxy, utterly defenseless against Imperial might. "Send an encoded transmission to Coruscant," Thrawn ordered. Inform High Command that we've discovered an uncontacted humanoid civilization. Request orders from the Imperial Security Bureau regarding annexation protocols. Sir, at our current distance from the core, that transmission will take weeks to reach Coruscant, and weeks more for a response. Then we wait, Thrawn said. But even as he spoke, he knew waiting was impossible. News of a discovery this significant would spread through the fleet. Ambitious officers would want to make their mark. The Emperor valued initiative, but also punished failure. 4 days later, Thrawn received orders. They came directly from Grand Moff Tarkin himself, transmitted through Imperial channels with the Emperor's seal attached. The message was brief and absolute. Commander Thrawn, you will proceed to the uncontacted world. Assess military capability. Offer terms of peaceful Imperial incorporation. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. The Emperor has authorized any means necessary to secure compliance. Reinforcements, including siege assets, are en route to your position. You have the honor of bringing a new population into the Empire's light. Do not fail. Thrawn read the orders 3 times. Siege assets was unmistakable code. Tarkin was sending the Death Star. Helm, plot a course through the anomaly, Thrawn commanded. Communications, prepare a message for broadcast on all frequencies the probe identified. We're going to introduce Earth to the Galactic Empire. Divided governments. Primitive weapons. By every Imperial standard, this was a world ripe for annexation. The Emperor himself would want to know about this discovery, a previously unknown human population, isolated from the galaxy, utterly defenseless against Imperial might. Send an encoded transmission to Coruscant, Thrawn ordered. Inform High Command that we've discovered an uncontacted humanoid civilization. Request orders from the Imperial Security Bureau regarding annexation protocols. Sir, at our current distance from the core, that transmission will take weeks to reach Coruscant, and weeks more for a response. Then we wait, Thrawn said. But even as he spoke, he knew waiting was impossible. News of a discovery this significant would spread through the fleet. Ambitious officers would want to make their mark. The Emperor valued initiative, but also punished failure. 4 days later, Thrawn received orders. They came directly from Grand Moff Tarkin himself, transmitted through Imperial channels with the Emperor's seal attached. The message was brief and absolute. Commander Thrawn, you will proceed to the uncontacted world. Assess military capability. Offer terms of peaceful Imperial incorporation. Resistance will be met with overwhelming force. The Emperor has authorized any means necessary to secure compliance. Reinforcements, including siege assets, are en route to your position. You have the honor of bringing a new population into the Empire's light. Do not fail. Thrawn read the orders 3 times. Siege assets was unmistakable code. Tarkin was sending the Death Star. Helm, plot a course through the anomaly, Thrawn commanded. Communications, prepare a message for broadcast on all frequencies the probe identified. We're going to introduce Earth to the Galactic Empire. Thrawn watched Earth rotate beneath the subjugator's hull, continents passing in silence. Somewhere down there, 8 billion people were realizing they weren't alone. Somewhere down there, humanity was about to make the most important decision in its history. And somewhere in hyperspace, traveling faster than light, the Death Star was coming. The United Nations building in New York City had never seen chaos like this. Representatives from 193 member nations crowded into the General Assembly Hall, their voices rising in dozens of languages as translators struggled to keep pace. Outside, throngs of protesters and believers pressed against security barricades, some demanding immediate surrender, others calling for armed resistance, and still more insisting the entire broadcast was an elaborate hoax. Secretary-General Chen Adeyemi stood at the podium, attempting to restore order with repeated strikes of the gavel. The sound was drowned out by shouting matches erupting across the chamber. Russian delegates accused the United States of fabricating the transmission. American representatives insisted their satellites had confirmed the presence of massive vessels in high orbit. Chinese diplomats demanded proof. European Union members called for unified response protocols that didn't exist. Order. Chen's voice finally cut through the noise. We have 72 hours. That gives us 3 days to verify, analyze, and respond. Panic serves no purpose. Verify. The French ambassador shot to his feet. Monsieur Secretary General, every telescope on Earth is pointed at those ships. They're real. They're massive. And they're waiting. Chen knew this. The entire world knew this. Within minutes of the broadcast, amateur astronomers had spotted them, 5 enormous vessels holding position in geosynchronous orbit, each one dwarfing the International Space Station by orders of magnitude. The largest measured over 1,600 meters long according to radar analysis. Nothing humanity had ever built approached that scale. The question, Chen continued, is what we do about it. The entity calling itself Commander Thrawn has offered us a choice. We can discuss terms of this Imperial Incorporation, or we can refuse. But we need to understand what refusal means. It means war, said General Morrison, the American Joint Chiefs Chairman, speaking from the Military Observers section. Madam Secretary General, with respect, we've run every simulation. Those vessels could obliterate our satellite network in minutes. They hold the high ground absolutely. Any military engagement would be catastrophically one-sided. Then we negotiate, the German Chancellor interjected via video link. We buy time. We learn about them. Perhaps they can be reasoned with. Or perhaps, the Russian president's voice crackled through the speakers, we are witnessing an invasion force that has given us the illusion of choice while positioning itself for conquest. I recommend we explore defensive options while diplomatic channels remain open. Chen rubbed her temples. Every nation present had a different priority. The smaller nations feared becoming pawns in great power struggles. The nuclear powers were calculating whether their arsenals could reach orbital targets. The developing world was wondering if imperial rule might actually improve their circumstances. Unity seemed impossible. We need more information, Chen declared. We should attempt direct communication with Commander Thrawn. Understand his terms. Understand what Imperial Incorporation actually means. I can answer that. The voice came from the chamber's rear entrance. Every head turned. A woman in her 50s, wearing a crisp military uniform that belonged to no Earth nation, walked down the central aisle. 2 figures flanked her, armored soldiers in white plastoid plate, carrying weapons that looked simultaneously ancient and impossibly advanced. Stormtroopers. The word flashed through every mind in the chamber simultaneously. My name is Captain Evera Sarn, the woman announced, her accent strange but her English perfect. I speak for Commander Thrawn. He has sent me to clarify the Emperor's generous offer and to ensure you understand the consequences of refusal. Security personnel moved to intercept, but Chen raised a hand. How did you get here? Shuttlecraft. We landed on your building's roof approximately 3 minutes ago. Your primitive air defense systems didn't detect us. Sarn's smile was polite but condescending. That should tell you everything you need to know about military resistance. She reached the podium, and Chen reluctantly stepped aside. Sarn produced a small device, a holographic projector. A 3-dimensional image materialized above the assembly floor, a galaxy, vast and spinning, with thousands of illuminated points marking inhabited systems. The Galactic Empire spans 50 million light-years, Sarn began. We control over 1.5 million worlds. Our Emperor, Palpatine, has brought order to chaos, ending millennia of conflict through unified law and absolute authority. Earth will join this community. You will contribute resources, manpower, and loyalty. In exchange, you will receive technology, protection, and purpose. And if we refuse? Chen asked quietly. Sarn's expression didn't change. Then Grand Moff Tarkin will demonstrate the Empire's commitment to order. He is currently en route with a siege platform capable of reducing your entire planet to debris. You call the concept Death Star in your popular fiction. That fiction is about to become very real. The chamber erupted again. Delegates shouted denials, threats, pleas. The stormtroopers raised their weapons slightly, not aiming, but ready. "You're threatening genocide," Chen said, her voice cutting through the chaos. 8 billion people. "We're offering salvation," Sarn corrected. "The Empire brings infrastructure, medicine, and opportunities your world has never imagined. Your nations war constantly over resources and ideology. We will end that. There will be one government. One law. One peace. At gunpoint. If necessary." Sarn deactivated the hologram. "You have 68 hours remaining. Commander Thrawn expects your answer. I suggest you use this time wisely. Debate if you must, but understand, the decision has already been made. The only question is how many of you survive to see the Empire's future." She turned to leave, her stormtrooper escorts flanking her perfectly. "Wait," Chen called. "At least tell us, why Earth? Why now? We're isolated, insignificant. What does your Empire gain from us?" Sarn paused at the chamber doors. 8 billion humans. Your genetic compatibility with our species is remarkable. You'll make excellent soldiers, workers, and citizens once properly integrated. And your planet's resources, water, minerals, breathable atmosphere, will serve the Empire's expansion into this region of space. You're worth conquering, Secretary General Chen. Be grateful for that. The doors closed behind her. Through the assembly's windows, delegates could see the shuttlecraft rising from the roof, accelerating impossibly fast before vanishing into the sky. Chen returned to the podium. The chamber was silent now, the weight of Sarn's words crushing debate. Every person present understood the calculus. Surrender meant subjugation. Resistance meant annihilation. There was no third option. "We vote in 24 hours, Chen announced. "Every nation will decide its position. But understand, this vote determines whether humanity ends or endures. Choose accordingly." Around the world, similar debates raged. Military commanders studied the orbital vessels, calculating firing solutions that couldn't work. Scientists analyzed the technology gap and concluded the fight was already lost. The Empire brings infrastructure, medicine, and opportunities your world has never imagined. Your nations war constantly over resources and ideology. We will end that. There will be one government. One law. One peace. At gunpoint. If necessary. Sarn deactivated the hologram. You have 68 hours remaining. Commander Thrawn expects your answer. I suggest you use this time wisely. Debate if you must, but understand, the decision has already been made. The only question is how many of you survive to see the Empire's future. She turned to leave, her stormtrooper escorts flanking her perfectly. "Wait," Chen called. "At least tell us, why Earth? Why now? We're isolated, insignificant. What does your Empire gain from us?" Sarn paused at the chamber doors. 8 billion humans. Your genetic compatibility with our species is remarkable. You'll make excellent soldiers, workers, and citizens once properly integrated. And your planet's resources, water, minerals, breathable atmosphere, will serve the Empire's expansion into this region of space. You're worth conquering, Secretary General Chen. Be grateful for that. The doors closed behind her. Through the assembly's windows, delegates could see the shuttlecraft rising from the roof, accelerating impossibly fast before vanishing into the sky. Chen returned to the podium. The chamber was silent now, the weight of Sarn's words crushing debate. Every person present understood the calculus. Surrender meant subjugation. Resistance meant annihilation. There was no third option. We vote in 24 hours, Chen announced. Every nation will decide its position. But understand, this vote determines whether humanity ends or endures. Choose accordingly. Around the world, similar debates raged. Military commanders studied the orbital vessels, calculating firing solutions that couldn't work. Scientists analyzed the technology gap and concluded the fight was already lost. The vote lasted 18 hours. When it concluded, the United Nations General Assembly had fractured along lines no one had predicted. Traditional alliances shattered. Economic partnerships dissolved. Ideological rivals found common ground while ancient friends became enemies. The final tally left humanity divided almost perfectly down the middle, but division was the same as defeat. 97 nations voted for immediate negotiation and conditional surrender. They called themselves the Pragmatic Coalition and argued that survival required cooperation, that resistance against impossible odds was suicide, that humanity could preserve itself by accepting imperial rule and working from within the system. Better to live as subjects than die as heroes. 96 nations voted for armed resistance and outright refusal. They formed the Terra Defense Alliance and insisted that freedom was worth dying for, that surrender meant slavery, that humanity's spirit couldn't be conquered even if its cities could be burned. Better to die free than live in chains. The remaining nations, small island states, neutral territories, and nations too paralyzed by internal conflict to decide, abstained. Their silence spoke volumes. Secretary-General Chen stood before the assembly one final time, her face drawn with exhaustion. We have no consensus. For the first time in United Nations history, humanity cannot speak with one voice when it matters most. Then we speak with two voices, said Ambassador Okonkwo of Nigeria, representing the Pragmatic Coalition. My people have endured colonization before. We survived by adapting. We'll survive this the same way. Captain Sarn, if you're listening, Nigeria offers its cooperation. We request formal terms for peaceful integration. Coward, spat General Morrison. You're selling out the entire species. I'm saving my people, Okonkwo shot back. What you call selling out, I call pragmatism. Your military pride won't stop orbital bombardment. Your nuclear weapons can't reach those ships. This isn't cowardice, it's mathematics. Chen raised her hand for silence, but the gesture was futile. The chamber had become a battlefield of words, each side convinced of its righteousness, neither able to compromise. In Moscow, President Volkov addressed his nation with grim determination. Russia has never surrendered to foreign invaders. Not to Napoleon. Not to Hitler. Not to these imperial colonizers. We will fight with every weapon at our disposal. We call upon all free nations to join us in defending Earth's sovereignty. In Beijing, the Politburo Standing Committee issued a carefully worded statement. The People's Republic of China recognizes the technological superiority of the Galactic Empire and seeks peaceful coexistence for the preservation of human civilization. We invite imperial representatives to begin cultural and technological exchanges. In Washington, President Hartley stood in the Oval Office, surrounded by military advisors showing her targeting data that proved what everyone already knew: Earth's entire arsenal couldn't penetrate a Star Destroyer's shields. We will defend American sovereignty, she declared anyway, but we will not fire the first shot. If the Empire wants a war, they'll have to start it. In Brussels, the European Parliament voted narrowly for negotiation, with 6 member states immediately announcing their withdrawal from the Union to pursue independent resistance. The European project, 70 years in the making, collapsed in a single afternoon. Across Africa, South America, and Asia, the pattern repeated. Some nations chose survival through submission. Others chose death with dignity. A few tried to maintain impossible neutrality. None had any real control over their fate. Captain Sarn received the fragmented responses aboard the subjugator, compiling them into a report for Commander Thrawn. He read it without expression. A divided world, he observed. This complicates occupation but simplifies conquest. The ones who surrender will help us subjugate the ones who resist. Should we accept their terms? Sarn asked. There are no terms, Thrawn replied. There is only compliance. Inform the Pragmatic Coalition that their cooperation is noted and will be rewarded with preferential treatment during integration. Inform the Terra Defense Alliance that they have 40 hours to reconsider before Grand Moff Tarkin arrives. And inform the neutral nations that neutrality is not an option, they will choose, or we will choose for them. Sarn saluted and departed. Thrawn turned to his tactical officer. How are they positioning their military assets? Chaos, sir. The nations that voted for resistance are mobilizing everything they have, nuclear submarines, air defense systems, ground forces. But they're not coordinating. The Americans are fortifying their coastlines. The Russians are dispersing their strategic rocket forces. The Europeans can't agree on command structure. They're preparing to fight 30 separate wars, not one unified defense. Good, Thrawn said. Fear makes them predictable. Pride makes them foolish. Both make them vulnerable. But even as he spoke, something unexpected was happening. Not in government chambers or military headquarters, but in smaller places. In university laboratories. Underground bunker networks. Secret research facilities. Dr. Sarah Chen, no relation to the Secretary General, worked in a Colorado military research installation that officially didn't exist. She'd spent the last 60 hours studying the footage of Captain Sarn's shuttlecraft, analyzing every frame, every technical detail visible in the brief landing sequence. It's not magic, she muttered to her team of physicists and engineers. It's technology. Advanced technology, but still bound by physical laws. Which means we can understand it. Which means we might be able to replicate it. In 40 hours? Her colleague Marcus asked incredulously. Sarah, we don't even know what their power source is. Could be fusion, could be antimatter, could be something we don't have words for. We start with what we can see. The shuttle's hull composition. The thrust-to-weight ratio. The energy signature our satellites detected. We reverse engineer what we can and steal what we can't. Steal from who? They're in orbit with guns pointed at us. Sarah pulled up a classified file on her monitor, intelligence gathered by NATO reconnaissance satellites. They've been sending down scout teams. Small deployments in remote areas, probably surveying resources. One team landed in Kazakhstan 6 hours ago. The local government reported it to the Pragmatic Coalition, who did nothing. But we're not the Pragmatic Coalition. Marcus understood immediately. You want to hit an Imperial ground team. Capture their equipment. And maybe capture one of them alive, Sarah added. If we're going to fight this, we need to know what we're fighting. And if we're going to survive this, we need their technology. Similar operations were being planned in a dozen nations. The Terra Defense Alliance was fragmenting further into desperate cells of resistance, each pursuing its own strategy. Some focused on military preparation. Others on evacuation plans for preserving humanity off-world, though Earth had barely 3 functioning spacecraft capable of reaching Mars, let alone escaping the solar system. And a few, like Sarah's team, focused on the only advantage humanity had ever possessed, the ability to adapt, innovate, and steal fire from the gods. In Geneva, a splinter group of scientists from CERN were attempting to understand the spatial anomaly that connected Earth to the Star Wars galaxy. If they could map it, perhaps they could collapse it, severing the Empire's access route. It was a long shot bordering on fantasy, but fantasy was all they had left. In Tokyo, engineers were retrofitting experimental railgun prototypes to target orbital trajectories. The weapons had never been tested at that range and probably couldn't penetrate Imperial shields, but desperation bred creativity. In Mumbai, a tech billionaire was funding a crash program to hack into any Imperial communications they could intercept, hoping to find exploitable vulnerabilities in their systems. And aboard the subjugator, Thrawn watched all of it unfold on his monitors. Every mobilization. Every desperate research project. Every act of defiance. "They're not negotiating," Lieutenant Ven observed. "Even the ones who voted for surrender, they're stalling. Buying time." "Of course they are," Thrawn replied. "They're human. Humans never accept defeat until defeat is absolute. That's why the Death Star is necessary." He checked the chronometer. 38 hours until Tarkin's arrival. 38 hours for Earth to hope, plan, and scramble. 38 hours until hope died. The message came at dawn, transmitted simultaneously to every capital in the Terra Defense Alliance. Commander Thrawn's voice was calm, almost regretful, as if he were delivering unfortunate but necessary news. "You have chosen resistance. The Empire respects strength, but not foolishness. To demonstrate the futility of military opposition, we will now provide a practical education. You will learn what it means to defy the Galactic Empire. This lesson will be brief." In the Pentagon Strategic Command Center, President Hartley watched the transmission with her Joint Chiefs, her face pale. "Where?" General Morrison was already pulling up tracking data. "They're moving. 2 Star Destroyers breaking orbit, descending toward." He stopped, his expression hardening. "Pine Gap. Pine Gap." The joint U.S.-Australian intelligence facility in Central Australia, one of the most sophisticated surveillance and signals intelligence stations on Earth. Remote, heavily defended, and utterly critical to global defense coordination. If the Empire wanted to send a message, they'd chosen their target well. "Get everyone out," Hartley ordered. "Now." "Madam President, we have maybe 10 minutes before." "Then use those 10 minutes." But Commander Thrawn had not given them 10 minutes. The 2 Imperial Star Destroyers, the Relentless and the Devastator, descended through Earth's atmosphere with impossible grace for vessels of their size. No sonic boom. No heat friction. Whatever technology propelled them simply ignored the physics that bound human aircraft. They took up position 3 kilometers above the Australian outback, their wedge-shaped hulls blotting out the rising sun. At Pine Gap, alarms screamed. Personnel evacuated in controlled chaos, years of drill taking over. Satellite uplinks went dead as Imperial jamming flooded every frequency. The facility's defensive missile batteries swiveled upward, targeting solutions calculated by computers that understood nothing of the enemy they faced. "Fire," ordered the facility commander, knowing it was futile but bound by duty to try. 12 surface-to-air missiles launched, their contrails painting white lines against the dawn sky. The Star Destroyers didn't maneuver. Didn't deploy countermeasures. The missiles simply detonated against invisible barriers 30 meters from the hulls, shield technology absorbing kilotons of explosive force without even flickering. Aboard the Relentless, Captain Tanis watched the primitive weapons dissipate against his shields with something approaching pity. Return fire. Precision strike. Minimize collateral damage to the surrounding area, we want the lesson clear. The Star Destroyer's ventral turbolaser batteries rotated into firing position. Green lances of coherent energy, each bolt carrying more destructive power than a tactical nuclear weapon, stabbed downward. Pine Gap ceased to exist. The underground facility, built to withstand nuclear strikes, vaporized in seconds. Reinforced concrete, steel blast doors, and advanced electronics melted into superheated plasma. The turbolasers carved through bedrock itself, turning the installation into a crater 300 meters deep. The few personnel who hadn't evacuated in time simply vanished, their atoms scattered before they could process what was happening. The strike lasted 7 seconds. When the light faded, nothing remained but a smoking hole in the earth and the faint ozone smell of ionized air. Target destroyed, Tanis reported to Thrawn. 0 Imperial casualties. Estimated enemy losses, 370 personnel, complete destruction of facility and all equipment. Broadcast footage to all Earth networks, Thrawn ordered. Let them see what their weapons accomplished. Let them see what ours accomplished. Then return to orbit and await further orders. The footage spread across Earth within minutes. News networks played it on repeat. Social media exploded with reaction. The message was undeniable: humanity's most advanced defenses were meaningless. Their missiles couldn't penetrate Imperial shields. Their bunkers couldn't withstand Imperial firepower. In 7 seconds, the Empire had demonstrated absolute military superiority. In the Terra Defense Alliance Command Center, a hastily established bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, General Morrison stared at the tactical display with dead eyes. 370 dead. The entire facility gone. And they barely slowed down to do it. They're making an example, said Colonel Wei of the Chinese People's Liberation Army. Showing collaborator nations that resistance costs lives while submission preserves them. It's psychological warfare. It's working, Morrison admitted bitterly. I'm getting reports from allied nations. Half of them are reconsidering their position. The Philippine government just withdrew from the alliance. Indonesia is negotiating with Captain Sarn. Brazil is calling for an emergency vote in their Congress. President Hartley's face appeared on the video link. General, what are our options? Realistically, Madam President, we can disperse our forces. Make occupation costly. Fight an insurgency that might last decades. But we cannot win a conventional war against those ships. Every simulation we run ends the same way, total defeat within 72 hours of engagement. Then we don't fight conventionally, Hartley said quietly. We fight dirty. General, authorize Dr. Chen's operation. If we're going to die, we die learning everything we can about these bastards. In Kazakhstan, Dr. Sarah Chen received the authorization with grim satisfaction. Her team had spent the last day tracking Imperial Scout patrols, identifying patterns in their deployments. One team, 2 stormtroopers and a sensor technician, had landed near Lake Balkhash, surveying mineral deposits far from population centers. This is insane, Marcus said as they loaded equipment into unmarked vehicles. We're about to attack soldiers from a Galactic Empire with hunting rifles and improvised EMPs. They're not invincible, Sarah insisted. Their armor's advanced, but it's still armor. Their weapons have triggers. They breathe atmosphere. Somewhere under all that technology, they're biological beings with vulnerabilities. We find those vulnerabilities. The assault team was small, 12 special forces operators from 5 different nations, volunteers who understood this was likely a one-way mission. They carried conventional weapons because they had nothing else. They wore body armor that wouldn't stop a blaster bolt. They moved through the Kazakh steppe with the knowledge that if the Empire retaliated for this, thousands might die. They did it anyway. The Imperial Scout team was exactly where Sarah's satellite tracking predicted, scanning rock formations with handheld devices, their white armor brilliant against the brown landscape. 2 stormtroopers stood guard while the technician worked. Standard patrol formation. Disciplined, but not expecting resistance from a species that had just watched Pine Gap evaporate. Remember, Sarah whispered into the radio, we need at least one alive. Alive means we can study their equipment before it self-destructs. The ambush was over in seconds. Sniper fire from 3 positions simultaneously, aimed not at the stormtroopers' armored torsos but at the joints, elbow, knee, neck seal. 2 shots found gaps in the armor. 1 stormtrooper went down immediately, his weapon clattering on stone. The second returned fire instinctively, red blaster bolts cutting through the air with deadly precision. An operator screamed as a bolt took him in the shoulder, the energy weapon cauterizing the wound even as it shattered bone. But his sacrifice bought time. The second sniper's shot caught the stormtrooper in the helmet's visual sensor array, cracking the lens. Blinded, disoriented, the trooper fired wildly. The technician ran. He made it 40 meters before a net launcher, designed for wildlife capture, brought him down, electromagnetic pulse woven into the netting disabling his personal shield generator. Go go go! Sarah shouted, and the team converged, securing the downed Imperial personnel before reinforcements could arrive. They had maybe 5 minutes before the Empire noticed the scout team's comms had gone silent. They took everything. Weapons, armor, scanning equipment, data pads. They secured the living technician, a pale, frightened man who looked disturbingly human, and retreated toward their extraction vehicles. For minutes later, TIE fighters screamed overhead, their distinctive roar announcing Imperial wrath. But by then, Sarah's team had vanished into a network of caves, their vehicles abandoned as decoys, their prize secured in underground bunkers that had been empty Soviet installations 40 years ago. Aboard the subjugator, alarms blared. "Sir," Lieutenant Ven reported, voice tight, "we've lost contact with Survey Team 7. Last known position was Kazakhstan. Satellite feed shows signs of combat." Thrawn's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. "Natives attacked Imperial personnel." "Apparently, sir. They took the bodies. Maybe prisoners." "Interesting." Thrawn studied the tactical map. "They're learning. Adapting. Stealing our technology to reverse engineer." He almost smiled. "I'd do the same in their position. Lieutenant, dispatch a recovery team. Find whoever took our people. And when you do, make sure the response is educational." But deep beneath the Kazakh steppe, Sarah Chen was already examining her prize. In her hands rested a stormtrooper's blaster rifle, its mechanisms alien but comprehensible. Beside her, the captured technician sat bound and terrified, staring at scientists who wielded his technology like children with fire. "What's your name?" Sarah asked gently. The technician's voice shook. "Operative Jens Marek." "Serial number." "I don't care about your serial number. I care about how this works." She held up the blaster. "Help me understand, and you'll be treated well. Refuse, and," she let the threat hang unspoken. Marek looked at the weapon in her hands, then at the determination in her eyes. He'd been trained to resist interrogation. He'd been taught that the Empire never negotiated with primitives. But he'd also just watched his entire patrol get ambushed by beings who weren't supposed to have the courage to fight back. It's a Blastek E-11, he whispered. Gas conversion enabler, standard power cell. Range of 300 meters. You don't have the manufacturing base to replicate it. We'll see about that, Sarah said, and gestured to her team. Start scanning. Every component, every material, every power signature. We have maybe 20 hours before Tarkin's Death Star arrives. Let's make them count. Above them, unaware, the Empire prepared its final lesson. But below, in darkness and desperation, humanity was learning the only lesson that mattered, how to fight impossible odds with nothing but ingenuity and refusal to surrender. The war hadn't begun yet. But the first shots had been fired. The Death Star emerged from hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, its arrival heralded by gravitational distortions that rattled satellites and sent every astronomer's instruments into chaos. The battle station was impossible, a moon-sized construct of metal and malice, its surface bristling with weapons emplacements and docking bays. Through telescopes across the planet, humanity watched their executioner approach at sublight speed, taking its time, savoring the fear. Grand Moff Tarkin stood on the Death Star's bridge, his gaunt face reflected in the viewport as Earth grew from a distant point to a blue marble hanging in the void. Behind him, junior officers worked in disciplined silence, each one aware they were witnessing history, the annexation of a new species into Imperial order, by force if necessary. Status of the native population? Tarkin asked, his voice dry and precise. Fragmented, Governor, reported Admiral Corlin. Approximately half have declared cooperation with occupation forces. The remainder persist in their delusion of resistance. Commander Thrawn's demonstration at Pine Gap has convinced several additional nations to reconsider, but a stubborn core refuses reason. How many in this stubborn core? Approximately 3 billion beings, concentrated primarily in North America, Eastern Europe, and parts of Asia. They possess nuclear weapons but lack delivery systems capable of threatening our vessels. Tarkin's thin lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. 3 billion fools. How convenient. Their removal will simplify integration of the more sensible populations. He turned to face his bridge crew. Bring us into high orbit. I want the natives to see this station clearly. Let them understand what happens when the Empire's patience expires. The Death Star advanced, its massive bulk casting a shadow across the moon as it passed. On Earth, panic and wonder warred in equal measure. Even the pragmatic coalition nations that had chosen submission felt their certainty waver at the sight of such overwhelming power. This wasn't a ship. It was a weapon designed for one purpose, planetary annihilation. In the Swiss Alps bunker, General Morrison watched the Death Star's approach with the calm of a man who'd accepted death. Tactical assessment. Colonel Wei didn't bother consulting her displays. That station can destroy Earth. The intelligence we've gathered from intercepted Imperial communications suggests it's equipped with a superlaser capable of shattering planetary crusts. One shot, and we become an asteroid field. How long until it's in firing position? 12 hours. Maybe less if Tarkin wants to make a point. Morrison nodded slowly. Then we have 12 hours to make whatever we're going to do count. Dr. Chen's team, what's their progress on the captured Imperial technology? She sent preliminary reports. The blaster technology is reproducible with our manufacturing capabilities, but it would take months to achieve mass production. The armor is more problematic, lightweight, energy-resistant materials we can't synthesize with current resources. The real breakthrough is the power cells. She thinks our physicists can reverse engineer them within weeks. We don't have weeks. I know, sir. Morrison turned to face the assembled representatives of the Terra Defense Alliance, leaders of nations that had chosen death over submission, knowing their choice doomed millions. We always knew it would come to this. The question was never whether we could win. It was whether we'd go down fighting. President Hartley's image appeared on screen, her face drawn. General, I've been contacted by Captain Sarn. She's offering one final chance to negotiate. The pragmatic coalition is pressuring us to accept. They're threatening to assist Imperial occupation forces if we don't stand down. Assist how? By revealing our defensive positions. Our bunker locations. Our command structure. Hartley's voice cracked. We're not just fighting the Empire anymore. We're fighting our own species. In Beijing, Premier Zhou addressed the Politburo with careful words. The Terra Defense Alliance's resistance endangers all of Earth. Their stubbornness will provoke Tarkin into using that weapon. We must act in humanity's best interest, which means cooperating with Imperial forces to neutralize the Alliance's military capabilities. You're proposing we betray them, said General Yang flatly. I'm proposing we survive, Zhou corrected. The Empire has promised that cooperative nations will be granted autonomy under Imperial oversight. Our systems, our culture, our people, preserved. But only if we demonstrate loyalty. The Alliance threatens that arrangement. So we become collaborators. We become survivors. Zhou's voice hardened. General, I'm authorizing our intelligence services to share Alliance positions with Captain Sarn. If that makes us traitors to the resistance, so be it. History will judge us as the ones who saved China while others chose extinction. Similar conversations played out in capitals across the pragmatic coalition. Fear and pragmatism warred with guilt and principle. Some nations genuinely believed cooperation was humanity's only hope. Others simply wanted to be on the winning side. And a few saw opportunity in the Empire's arrival, a chance to settle old scores, gain advantages over rivals, and reshape Earth's political order with Imperial backing. Within 6 hours, Captain Sarn had received intelligence from 17 nations detailing the Terra Defense Alliance's infrastructure. Bunker coordinates. Communication networks. Leadership locations. Supply routes. Everything the Empire needed to decapitate the Resistance in a single, coordinated strike. Thrawn reviewed the intelligence aboard the subjugator with professional appreciation. They're selling out their own species for promises of preferential treatment. Predictable, but useful. Should we honor those promises? Lieutenant Ven asked. Eventually. Once Earth is fully pacified and no longer requires their assistance, we'll integrate them on equal terms with everyone else, complete subjugation. Thrawn highlighted several locations on the tactical map. For now, prepare strike packages for these command bunkers. I want simultaneous attacks within the hour. And Lieutenant? Make sure the collaborator nations see the results. Let them believe their cooperation matters. But in Kazakhstan, Dr. Sarah Chen's team was achieving what no government could, actual progress. The captured stormtrooper rifle had been disassembled, analyzed, and partially understood. The power cell's exotic matter composition was being replicated in laboratory conditions. And Operative Marek, terrified but cooperative, was providing technical specifications that Earth's scientists devoured like water in a desert. The Empire's technology isn't magic, Sarah explained to her team, exhaustion evident in her voice. It's just physics we haven't discovered yet. This power cell uses controlled exotic particle decay to generate plasma. We can do that. This armor uses ablative energy dispersion through layered metamaterials. We can synthesize that. Given time. We don't have time, Marcus interrupted. That Death Star is 12 hours from firing position. In 12 hours, none of this matters. Sarah slammed her hand on the table. Then we make it matter in 12 hours. We can't build an army. We can't manufacture shields. But we can understand their systems well enough to find weaknesses. Every technology has vulnerabilities. Every weapon has counters. We find them, we transmit them to Alliance forces, and we give them a fighting chance. A fighting chance against a moon-sized battle station? Better than no chance at all. The breakthrough came at hour 9. A junior engineer named Yuki Tanaka, examining the captured equipment's communications array, discovered something extraordinary. Dr. Chen, the Imperial comm systems, they're using quantum entanglement for FTL communication. But there's a security flaw. The encryption rotates every 6 hours, but during rotation there's a 3-second window where the system defaults to factory authentication protocols. Sarah leaned over Yuki's shoulder, heart racing. You're saying we could access their network? For 3 seconds. Maybe long enough to plant malware, extract data, or cause disruption. But we'd need to time it perfectly with their rotation cycle, and we'd only get one shot before they detect and lock us out permanently. When's the next rotation? Yuki checked her calculations. 4 hours and 17 minutes. Right around when the Death Star achieves optimal firing position. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. 3 seconds of access to Imperial communications. What could they do with that? Upload a virus? Probably not, Imperial systems would have countermeasures Earth couldn't circumvent. Extract tactical data. Useful, but not game-changing. Send a false command. Too risky, authentication would likely fail. But maybe they could do something simpler. Something the Empire wouldn't expect because it was so primitive, so human. Get me a direct line to General Morrison, Sarah ordered. I think we have one shot at helping the Alliance. It won't stop the Death Star, but it might buy us time to evacuate population centers. Above Earth, the Death Star settled into high orbit, its superlaser arrays rotating into alignment. Tarkin stood before the viewport, hands clasped behind his back, counting down the final hours before he demonstrated the Empire's power in the most absolute terms possible. "Governor," Admiral Corlin reported, "we've detected unusual electromagnetic activity from the planet's surface. Communications bursts in unusual patterns. Possibly encrypted military traffic. They're planning something," Tarkin mused. How quaint. As if planning mattered when one faces overwhelming force. He checked his chronometer. 4 hours until we fire. Let them plan. Let them hope. It will make their despair more complete when that hope dies. But in bunkers and caves across Earth, hope wasn't dying, it was crystallizing into desperate, brilliant action. Sarah Chen's discovery was being transmitted through Alliance networks. Engineers studied the vulnerability. Hackers examined the timing requirements. And soldiers prepared for whatever slim chance those 3 seconds of access might provide. The countdown continued. 4 hours until the Death Star could fire. 4 hours and 17 minutes until the Imperial Communication System rotation. 4 hours and 17 minutes until humanity would learn if Ingenuity could matter against Empire, if 3 seconds of opportunity could change the fate of 8 billion lives. The universe held its breath. The betrayals came swiftly and without mercy. At 3:47 GMT, Imperial TIE bombers screamed through Earth's atmosphere, targeting coordinates provided by pragmatic coalition intelligence. The Swiss Alps bunker, headquarters of the Terra Defense Alliance, received 30 seconds of warning before the first proton bombs detonated. The mountain itself seemed to shudder as explosions tore through reinforced tunnels, collapsing command centers that had cost billions to construct. General Morrison died at his post, crushed beneath tons of stone and steel. Colonel Wei survived only because she'd been inspecting perimeter defenses when the attack began. She emerged from the rubble to find the Alliance's central command structure obliterated, communication network severed, and the chain of command shattered. Across the globe, simultaneous strikes eliminated resistance leadership with surgical precision. An American bunker beneath the Rockies. A Russian command post in the Urals. Underground facilities in India, South Africa, Argentina. The Empire didn't waste ammunition, each target received exactly enough firepower to guarantee destruction, no more, no less. Efficient. Clinical. Devastating. Within 2 hours, the Terra Defense Alliance had lost 70% of its senior leadership and 40% of its coordinated military capability. Captain Sarn transmitted her gratitude to the collaborating nations. The Empire recognizes your loyalty. When Earth is fully integrated, your cooperation will be remembered and rewarded. In Beijing, Premier Zhou watched footage of the strikes and told himself it had been necessary. In Brussels, what remained of the European Parliament justified the intelligence sharing as humanitarian, preventing a larger war that would kill millions more. In Jakarta, the Indonesian government publicly celebrated their decision to cooperate, pointing to their preserved infrastructure as proof of wisdom. But in the streets of those same cities, different emotions simmered. Protesters gathered despite curfews, calling their governments traitors. Graffiti appeared overnight, collaborator scum and rather die free scrawled across government buildings. The pragmatic coalition had preserved their nation's physical structures, but something fundamental had broken in their population's souls. In Washington, President Hartley stood in the Situation Room, now the de facto Alliance Command Center after the Swiss bunker's destruction, and addressed the surviving military leadership via encrypted satellite links that would likely be compromised within hours. "They hit us hard," she said quietly, "but they didn't kill us. The Alliance still exists. Our forces are dispersed, disorganized, but alive. We have maybe 2 hours before the Death Star fires. Colonel Wei, you have operational command. Make it count." Wei's face on the screen was smudged with dust and blood. "Madam President, with respect, we've lost. Our command structure is gone. Our defensive positions are compromised. Even if Dr. Chen's communication hack works, all we'll gain is 3 seconds of confusion. That won't stop a super laser." "Then we don't stop it," Hartley said. We survive it. Evacuate every population center within 200 kilometers of likely targets. Disperse our military assets so no single strike can eliminate them. And we make the Empire understand that destroying Earth won't pacify it, it will create 8 billion martyrs whose memory will haunt them across the galaxy. Assuming anyone survives to remember. Someone will survive. Someone always survives. Hartley's voice hardened with conviction she didn't entirely feel. Broadcast this message on all channels: the Terra Defense Alliance will not surrender. We will not beg. And when the Death Star fires, if it fires, we'll make sure the Empire knows they didn't conquer Earth. They destroyed it because they feared what humanity might become. The message transmitted globally. In Alliance nations, it sparked final preparations, civilians flooding away from cities, military units taking up guerrilla positions in wilderness areas, families saying goodbyes that might be permanent. In pragmatic coalition nations, it sparked bitter division, some citizens fleeing to join the resistance despite their government's cooperation, others praying that compliance would spare them from the Alliance's fate. Aboard the Death Star, Tarkin received the message and dismissed it with contempt. Martyrs are only useful if someone remembers them. When this is finished, Earth's history will be written by Imperial archivists. The resistance will be a footnote, a cautionary tale about the price of defiance. Governor, Admiral Corlin said carefully, the Emperor's orders were to secure Earth's population for integration into the Empire. If we destroy the planet, we won't destroy the planet. We'll destroy a city. One major population center, preferably in the heart of Resistance territory. That will demonstrate the Death Star's power while preserving sufficient population for labor integration. Tarkin studied the planetary map. What would you recommend, Admiral? Corlin highlighted several options. New York City, 8 million inhabitants, symbolic significance as the United Nations location. Moscow, center of Russian resistance. Los Angeles, major infrastructure and cultural importance. New York, Tarkin decided. The symbolism is perfect. The location where they debated surrender will become the monument to their refusal. Charge the superlaser. Target coordinates, 40.7128 north, 74.0060 west. Manhattan Island. Fire in 90 minutes. The order rippled through the Death Star's systems. Power cores that could energize a small planet began channeling energy into the superlaser focusing array. Crews conducted final system checks. Gunners calibrated targeting solutions with precision that would have impressed Earth's scientists if they weren't about to be its victims. On Earth, sensors detected the energy buildup. Every government with satellite monitoring capability saw it. The numbers were incomprehensible, energy output equivalent to Earth's total power generation for a century, focused into a single weapon, targeting a single city. In New York, emergency broadcasts ordered immediate evacuation. 8 million people attempted to flee in 90 minutes. The bridges and tunnels choked with humanity. Subways ran continuously, carrying refugees to whatever safety distance from ground zero might provide. Some people refused to leave, too paralyzed by disbelief or too resigned to fate. Others couldn't leave, hospitals with immobile patients, emergency responders maintaining order, and scattered individuals who simply had nowhere else to go. Dr. Sarah Chen, still in the Kazakhstan facility, watched the countdown with desperation clawing at her chest. Yuki, how long until the comm system rotation? 43 minutes. We'll have access after the Death Star fires, not before. Then we change targets. Can we access the Death Star's systems during those 3 seconds? Yuki's fingers flew across her keyboard. Maybe. The Death Star is networked with the Star Destroyer fleet. If we penetrate their communications during the rotation window, we might reach the battle station's tactical network. But Dr. Chen, what can we do in 3 seconds that matters? Sarah stared at the data flowing across screens, Imperial communication protocols they'd partially decrypted, system architectures they barely understood, and one impossibly slim chance to make a difference. We send them a virus? No, too sophisticated, they'd block it. We extract data? No, not enough time to find anything useful. We send a false command. Authentication would fail. She paused. What if we don't try to be sophisticated? What if we just scream? Marcus looked at her incredulously. Scream. Overload their communications network. Take every transmitter on Earth, every radio station, every satellite uplink, every communication device we can access, and simultaneously broadcast white noise at maximum power through their quantum entanglement network during those 3 seconds. It won't damage their systems, but it might disrupt coordination. Create confusion. Make them doubt their orders for even a few minutes. A few minutes changes nothing. It changes when they fire, Sarah said intensely. If we disrupt their targeting sequence, force them to recalibrate, we buy time for more people to evacuate New York. Maybe only 10 minutes. Maybe 30. But that's thousands of lives, Marcus. Thousands of people who get a chance to run. Yuki was already calculating. I can coordinate with Alliance communication networks. Set up a simultaneous broadcast that triggers exactly when the Imperial rotation window opens. It's insane, but it might work. Do it, Sarah ordered. And pray that 3 seconds of chaos is enough. In New York, Mayor Chen, distant cousin to both Sarah and Secretary General Chen, though she'd never met either, stood atop a Manhattan rooftop watching the evacuation. Below, rivers of humanity flowed outward, carrying whatever they could grab in desperate flight. Above, the Death Star hung like a malevolent moon, its surface glinting in sunlight that would soon ignite into apocalypse. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, then reconsidered. What did she have to lose? Mayor Chen. This is Dr. Sarah Chen. I'm part of a research team we're trying to help. I can't explain everything, but in about 40 minutes, there's going to be a massive communications disruption. When it happens, you'll have a window, maybe 10 minutes, maybe more, to get additional people out of the target zone. Tell your emergency services to be ready. Every second will count. Who are you? Someone who refuses to give up. Good luck, Mayor. The line went dead. Mayor Chen stared at her phone, then at the Death Star, then at the thousands still streaming through streets below. 10 extra minutes. If this mysterious Sarah Chen could deliver that, thousands more might survive. She grabbed her radio. All emergency services, this is Mayor Chen. In 40 minutes, we may have a brief window for additional evacuation. I know you're exhausted. I know it seems hopeless. But prepare for one final push. On my signal, get as many people out as you can. Across the city, firefighters, police officers, and volunteers who'd been working for hours without rest nodded and prepared for one more effort. Not because they believed it would work, but because giving up was unthinkable. Aboard the Death Star, Tarkin watched the chronometer count down. 30 minutes to firing sequence. Admiral, status. Superlaser charged and ready, Governor. Target locked. All systems optimal. The city of New York will cease to exist on your command. Tarkin nodded. Then let us proceed. Fire when? The communication station erupted in alarm. Every screen flickered. Officers shouted confused reports. And through the Death Star's quantum entanglement network, an impossible roar of white noise, millions of simultaneous transmissions from Earth's surface, screamed through Imperial systems like a hurricane of chaos. It lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then silence. But in those 3 seconds, targeting solutions corrupted. Firing sequences reset. And precious minutes slipped away while Imperial technicians frantically diagnosed the disruption. On Earth, Sarah Chin collapsed in her chair, tears streaming down her face. Did it work? Did we buy them time? Yuki checked the satellite feeds. The Death Star's energy signature fluctuated. They're recalibrating. Estimate 12 to 15 minutes delay. 15 minutes. 500 extra people might escape. 1,000. More. It wasn't victory. It wasn't salvation. But it was something. It was humanity refusing to die quietly, fighting for every second, every life, every tiny act of defiance against impossible odds. And 15 minutes later, when the Death Star's superlaser finally fired, the city of New York was slightly emptier than it would have been. Which meant that slightly more people lived to witness what came next. The superlaser fired. A beam of condensed energy, green and terrible, wider than a city block, lanced downward from the Death Star's focusing dish. It crossed the distance from high orbit to Earth's surface in less than a second, traveling at relativistic speeds that made evasion impossible and survival meaningless. Manhattan Island, home to 8 million souls just hours before, vanished. The beam struck bedrock with such force that matter itself ceased to exist in conventional terms. Stone, steel, glass, water, everything within the impact zone converted instantly to plasma. The explosion expanded outward in a perfect sphere, a miniature star birthed on Earth's surface. Buildings 20 miles away crumbled from the shockwave. Windows shattered in Philadelphia. The electromagnetic pulse knocked out power grids across the entire eastern seaboard. When the light faded and the shockwave dissipated, New York City was simply gone. In its place, a crater 5 miles across, glowing with residual heat, filled rapidly by seawater pouring in from the breached coastline. The surrounding boroughs, Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, were devastated wastelands of collapsed structures and raging fires. 7.5 million people had evacuated in time. 500,000 had not. The death toll was broadcast globally within minutes. 500,000 dead in an instant. The single deadliest attack in human history, dwarfing every war, every plague, every disaster that had come before. And it had taken the Empire 7 seconds to accomplish. In the Situation Room in Washington, President Hartley watched the satellite footage in silence. No word seemed adequate. No response seemed possible. 500,000 American citizens had just been murdered to prove a point, and Earth's most powerful military couldn't stop it, couldn't retaliate, couldn't do anything but witness. Madam President, an aide whispered, Grand Moff Tarkin is broadcasting. Tarkin's gaunt face appeared on every screen across Earth. His expression held no triumph, no satisfaction, only cold certainty. People of Earth. You have seen what happens when the Galactic Empire's patience is tested. The city you called New York is now a monument to the cost of defiance. But understand, this was mercy. We destroyed one city. We could have destroyed your planet. That we did not is evidence of imperial restraint. He paused, letting the words sink in. The Terra Defense Alliance has 48 hours to surrender unconditionally. Every military asset. Every resistance fighter. Every nation that continues to defy imperial authority. If compliance is not absolute within that time frame, we will select another target. Perhaps Moscow. Perhaps Los Angeles. Perhaps Beijing. Yes, even among those who claim cooperation, we have identified separatist cells and resistance sympathizers. The threat was clear. Even the pragmatic coalition wasn't safe if the alliance continued fighting. To the civilians of Earth, Tarkin continued, you have a choice. Report resistance activities in your areas. Provide intelligence on alliance military positions. Assist Imperial occupation forces in establishing order. Those who cooperate will be integrated peacefully into the Empire. Those who resist will share New York's fate. The broadcast ended. Silence followed, the silence of a species that had just learned what true helplessness felt like. But in that silence, something unexpected happened. Not surrender. Not collapse. Something harder and colder. Rage. In Moscow, President Volkov addressed his nation with grief in his eyes and steel in his voice. They murdered 500,000 people to frighten us into submission. They believe we will trade freedom for survival, that we will betray our principles to avoid becoming the next target. They are wrong. Russia has faced extinction before, from Napoleon, from Hitler, from famine and war and every disaster history could inflict. We survived because we refused to break. We survive today by making the same choice. The Terra Defense Alliance will not surrender. If Moscow must burn, then let it burn. But we will never kneel. Similar declarations came from Alliance leadership worldwide. Defiant. Furious. Grief-stricken but unbowed. The Death Star had killed 500,000, but it had also united the remaining resistance in ways diplomacy never could. The attack had been meant to inspire terror. Instead, it inspired something far more dangerous, absolute commitment. In Washington, President Hartley made her own broadcast. To the people of the Pragmatic Coalition, you who chose cooperation believing it would spare you, you've seen what imperial mercy looks like. They murdered an American city. They'll murder yours too if you stop being useful. There is no safety in collaboration, no security in surrender. There is only the choice between dying on your feet or living on your knees until they decide you're expendable. The message sparked immediate turmoil in pragmatic coalition nations. Populations that had reluctantly accepted their government's surrender now questioned that choice. Protests erupted in Beijing, Jakarta, Brussels. Military officers in several nations quietly contacted alliance representatives, offering clandestine support. The political calculation that had seemed rational 48 hours ago now looked like cowardice. Premier Zhou convened emergency sessions in Beijing, frantically trying to maintain control as his own people turned against him. We saved Chinese lives by cooperating. Would you prefer we suffer New York's fate? We'd prefer you show spine, a Politburo member shot back. The Empire just threatened to destroy Beijing even though we've surrendered. What did our cooperation accomplish except proving we're cowards? The same crisis played out in dozens of capitals. The pragmatic coalition was fracturing from within, its population's willingness to submit evaporating in the face of imperial brutality. Captain Sarn, attempting to coordinate with increasingly uncooperative collaborator governments, reported the situation to Commander Thrawn with frustration. Sir, the demonstration has had the opposite effect. Instead of breaking resistance morale, it's hardened their resolve. And the cooperative nations are becoming unstable. Several are experiencing riots and calls for their governments to switch allegiance to the alliance. Thrawn studied the planetary situation map with narrowed eyes. Grand Moff Tarkin underestimated them. He thought overwhelming force would guarantee submission. But humans, these humans especially, appear to respond to existential threat not with surrender but with desperate courage. He almost sounded impressed. Fascinating. They know they can't win, yet they continue fighting. It's tactically irrational but psychologically logical. Should we recommend additional strikes to Governor Tarkin? No. More destruction will only strengthen their unity. What we need is division. Thrawn highlighted several locations on the map. These resistance cells, they're scattered, disorganized. They can't coordinate effectively with their command structure destroyed. We begin targeted operations. Small unit actions. Stormtrooper deployments to secure strategic resources. We don't try to conquer the whole planet at once. We take it piece by piece, making occupation seem inevitable. The Imperial ground war began within hours. AT-AT walkers descended on major military installations that Alliance forces hadn't abandoned quickly enough. Stormtrooper legions deployed to cities across the globe, establishing checkpoints and curfews. TIE fighters patrolled urban centers, their distinctive roar a constant reminder of Imperial presence. Star Destroyers maintained orbital positions, ready to provide fire support or orbital bombardment at Commander Thrawn's order. But Earth's resistance had learned from New York. They didn't try to hold territory against impossible odds. They dispersed into cells, operating independently, using guerrilla tactics that had worked against occupiers throughout human history. In Afghanistan, tribal fighters who'd resisted empires for centuries turned their expertise against stormtroopers, using mountain terrain and improvised tactics that Imperial training hadn't prepared for. Blaster rifles were superior to AK-47s, but they still jammed in desert sand, and stormtroopers still needed to breathe in environments where humans had adapted over generations. In South America, resistance fighters melted into rainforests, conducting hit-and-run attacks against Imperial patrols before vanishing into vegetation so dense that orbital surveillance couldn't penetrate it. For every guerrilla the Empire killed, 3 more emerged, fueled by rage and the knowledge that submission meant becoming slaves to distant tyrants. In urban centers, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, Sydney, resistance took different forms. Hackers disrupted Imperial communication networks with cyber attacks. Engineers sabotaged infrastructure the Empire tried to appropriate. Ordinary citizens engaged in passive resistance, refusing to cooperate with occupation forces, hiding alliance fighters, spreading information through underground networks that hadn't existed 48 hours before. The Empire controlled the skies, the orbital space, and the raw military power. But humanity controlled the ground, the knowledge of terrain, and the desperate fury of a species fighting for survival. Dr. Sarah Chen, still working in the Kazakhstan facility, received reports from resistance cells worldwide. They're holding, she told her exhausted team. Not winning. But not losing either. The Empire expected easy pacification. They're learning that 8 billion angry humans aren't easy to control. It won't matter, Marcus said quietly. Every day this continues, Tarkin gets closer to firing again. And next time it'll be Moscow or Los Angeles or Beijing. Millions dead. The resistance knows it. We're just buying time until the Empire gets tired of resistance and starts exterminating population centers. Then we use that time. Sarah pulled up data on the captured Imperial equipment they'd been studying. We've reverse-engineered their blaster technology enough to produce crude prototypes. Not as powerful as the real thing, but functional. We've mapped their communication protocols well enough to intercept and occasionally decrypt tactical transmissions. And Operative Merrick has provided us with intelligence on Imperial tactical doctrine. She gestured to the frightened Imperial technician, who'd proven surprisingly cooperative once he realized the humans weren't going to torture him. He's explained their logistics, their supply lines, their vulnerability windows. The Empire is powerful, but they're stretched thin. They came expecting submission, not prolonged insurgency. Every day we resist is a day they're spending resources occupying a hostile population instead of expanding elsewhere. You're saying we can outlast them? I'm saying we force them to decide whether Earth is worth the cost. Sarah's eyes blazed with determination born from witnessing 500,000 deaths. Make occupation so expensive, so bloody, so exhausting that the Empire decides destroying us entirely is easier than controlling us. And once they make that choice, once they reveal themselves as genocidal conquerors rather than benevolent rulers, the pragmatic coalition has no reason to keep cooperating. Unity becomes inevitable. And 8 billion united humans, willing to die rather than submit, might just be more trouble than we're worth. It was a desperate strategy. A strategy that guaranteed millions more deaths. A strategy with no clear victory condition, only the hope that human stubbornness could exhaust even a Galactic Empire's patience. But it was all they had. Above Earth, aboard the Death Star, Grand Moff Tarkin studied casualty reports from ground operations and realized something troubling: the natives were adapting. Learning. Fighting smarter with each engagement. His deadline for Alliance surrender was approaching, and instead of submission, he was seeing escalating resistance. Admiral Corlin, Tarkin said quietly, select another target. A city in Alliance territory. Population of at least 5 million. We fire in 48 hours unless the resistance collapses completely. Which city, Governor? Tarkin studied the planetary map, his finger hovering over Moscow, Los Angeles, Sao Paulo. Half a dozen cities that could burn. Half a dozen opportunities to demonstrate imperial power. He chose Moscow. The announcement transmitted globally, 48 hours until Russia's capital shared New York's fate. An Earth prepared to learn whether courage could matter against inevitability. Moscow did not sleep. For 48 hours, the Russian capital transformed into a paradox, a city simultaneously evacuating and preparing to die. 20 million people in the greater metropolitan area faced an impossible choice: flee to the countryside and abandon their homes, or stay and become martyrs for a cause that seemed increasingly futile. Most chose to flee. Trains, buses, cars, and countless citizens on foot streamed outward in every direction, carrying whatever they could salvage from lives they might never return to. The highways became rivers of humanity flowing away from ground zero, reminiscent of World War II evacuations that still haunted Russian collective memory. But some stayed. President Volkov remained in the Kremlin, refusing to abandon his post even as his advisors begged him to relocate to command bunkers in the Urals. If Moscow burns, its president burns with it, he declared. I will not ask my people to face death while I hide underground. Thousands of volunteers, firefighters, doctors, emergency responders, and ordinary citizens, chose to stay with him, preparing to manage the aftermath of an attack they couldn't prevent. Some were driven by duty. Others by defiance. And more than a few simply had nowhere else to go. In Kazakhstan, Dr. Sarah Chen worked through her third sleepless night, assembling every piece of intelligence they'd gathered on Death Star operations. Operative Marek, the captured Imperial technician, had proven invaluable, providing details about the battle station systems that Earth's scientists would have taken years to discover independently. The superlaser requires a recharge cycle, Marek explained, his voice hoarse from hours of debriefing. After firing, it takes approximately 24 hours to rebuild sufficient energy for another planetary scale shot. Smaller blasts, city-destroying rather than planet-destroying, can be fired more frequently, but still require significant power accumulation. So after Moscow, they'll need time before firing again, Sarah said, scribbling calculations. That's something. Maybe enough time to evacuate the next target. If they even give warning, Marcus interjected bitterly. They could just start eliminating cities without announcement. Terror through unpredictability. Tarkin won't do that, Marek said quietly. He believes in order through fear, but calculated fear. Random destruction wouldn't serve Imperial interests. He wants Earth submissive, not obliterated. Every attack will be strategic, designed to maximize psychological impact and minimize resource loss. Sarah studied the young technician. He'd been cooperative, but something in his tone suggested conflict beneath the surface. You don't approve. Marek was silent for a long moment. I'm a loyal Imperial citizen. I believe in order, in structure, in the Emperor's vision for the galaxy. But, this isn't how I thought it would be. When they told us we were discovering new worlds, bringing civilization to primitives, I imagined. I don't know. Grateful populations. Peaceful integration. Not mass graves and cities turned to glass. Welcome to the reality of empire, Sarah said softly. Every conqueror believes they're bringing order. Every victim knows it's just violence with paperwork. Before Marek could respond, alarms sounded across the facility. Yuki's voice crackled through the intercom. Dr. Chen, we're picking up massive Imperial communications traffic. Something's happening. Multiple Star Destroyers breaking orbit, descending toward, oh God. They're not going for Moscow. Sarah's blood ran cold. Where? Everywhere. Simultaneous deployments to 50 major cities. Beijing, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, Cairo, Sao Paulo, Mexico City, they're landing occupation forces globally. This isn't an attack. It's an invasion. Commander Thrawn's strategy had shifted. Rather than destroy another city and further unite resistance, the Empire would demonstrate control through presence. 50 cities occupied simultaneously. Hundreds of thousands of stormtroopers deployed at once. AT-AT walkers patrolling streets from Sydney to Stockholm. The message was clear: Earth belonged to the Empire now, and resistance was futile. But Thrawn had miscalculated one critical factor: the level of organization Earth's resistance had achieved in just days. In Paris, French resistance fighters who'd been stockpiling stolen Imperial equipment launched coordinated attacks on landing zones before stormtroopers could fully disembark. Crude copies of blaster rifles, built from Dr. Chen's reverse-engineered designs, opened fire alongside conventional weapons. The Imperial troops were caught off guard. They'd expected disorganized rabble, not tactical ambushes. In Tokyo, resistance cells used the city's dense urban environment to their advantage, luring stormtrooper patrols into subway systems and then collapsing tunnels with improvised explosives. The tactic was desperate and costly: dozens of civilian casualties, infrastructure damage that would take years to repair, but it worked. 3 stormtrooper squads were buried, their expensive armor and training rendered useless by low-tech sabotage. In Mumbai, a different approach: passive resistance on a scale the Empire had never encountered. When stormtroopers attempted to establish checkpoints, millions of citizens simply sat down in the streets, refusing to move, refusing to cooperate, creating human barriers that couldn't be cleared without committing atrocities that even Thrawn hesitated to order. The tactic was borrowed from India's own history of nonviolent resistance, updated for an alien occupation. But it was in Beijing where everything changed. Premier Zhou had spent days negotiating with Captain Sarn, positioning China as the Empire's most reliable collaborator, even offering to assist in suppressing other resistance movements. His government had provided intelligence, agreed to economic integration, and publicly endorsed imperial rule. None of that had protected Beijing from occupation deployment. The stormtrooper transports landed in Tiananmen Square, symbolic and strategic, right in the heart of China's political center. Captain Sarn herself led the occupation force, confident that Zhou's government would facilitate peaceful transition. Instead, she found the square surrounded by Chinese military units with weapons raised. "Captain Sarn," General Liang's voice boomed through loudspeakers, "you were told Beijing was cooperative. You were told we'd accepted imperial authority. That was a lie. Premier Zhou is under arrest for treason. The People's Republic of China hereby joins the Terra Defense Alliance. And you are trespassing on sovereign territory." Sarn's hand moved toward her sidearm. "General, you're making a catastrophic mistake. Stand down immediately, or what? You'll destroy Beijing like you destroyed New York. Go ahead. We're ready to die. The question is whether you're ready to explain to Grand Moff Tarkin why you lost the Empire's most valuable collaborator because you couldn't negotiate without threats." The standoff lasted 17 seconds, an eternity of tension where thousands of fingers rested on triggers that could ignite a massacre. Sarn made her choice. "All units, withdraw to transports. We're returning to orbit. This situation requires command-level reassessment." As the Imperial forces retreated, General Yang broadcast China's defection to the world. Within hours, the pragmatic coalition began to collapse. If even China, the most pragmatic, the most calculating, the nation with the most to lose, had chosen resistance, what hope did collaboration offer? Brazil switched allegiance. Then Indonesia. Then South Korea. Within 24 hours of Thrawn's global occupation attempt, 43 nations that had pledged cooperation declared for the alliance instead. Aboard the subjugator, Thrawn studied the cascading failures with the calm of a professional analyzing an unexpected opponent. We underestimated their capacity for unified action. The destruction of New York didn't break them, it radicalized them. And our occupation deployment provided a rallying point for cooperation we accidentally eliminated. Governor Tarkin is demanding we proceed with Moscow's destruction as planned, Lieutenant Ven reported nervously. Of course he is. Tarkin thinks in terms of overwhelming force. But these humans have demonstrated that force alone won't pacify them. Thrawn highlighted population centers on his tactical map. We need a different approach. Lieutenant, contact the Emperor directly. We require additional resources and a revised occupation strategy. This is no longer a simple annexation. This is a counterinsurgency campaign against a species that appears genetically incapable of surrender. In Moscow, the countdown to destruction continued. 36 hours. 24 hours. 12 hours. The evacuation continued, but fewer people left with each passing hour. Those who remained weren't staying because they couldn't leave, they were staying because they chose to bear witness. If Moscow burned, the world would see Russians refusing to run, standing in their city square, facing the Death Star's weapon with eyes open and spirits unbroken. President Volkov addressed the world from the Kremlin steps, St. Basil's Cathedral behind him, knowing these might be his final words. Humanity has faced extinction before. Not from empires, but from ice ages, from volcanic winters, from cosmic accidents that should have killed us. We survived because we refused to accept death. We're stubborn. Unreasonable. Impossibly defiant. The Empire thinks they can break us with fear. They don't understand, fear is just another challenge we're too proud to accept. He paused, looking directly at the cameras broadcasting to billions. To every human watching, whether you've declared for the Alliance or tried to negotiate with these invaders, understand this, there is no negotiating with an empire that destroys cities to prove points. There is no collaborating with occupiers who see us as resources to exploit. There is only resistance or death. And given that choice, I choose resistance. Moscow chooses resistance. I hope, when they come for your city, you make the same choice. Aboard the Death Star, Grand Moff Tarkin listened to Volkov's speech with thin-lipped displeasure. The Russian president's defiance should have been meaningless, a primitive shouting at the void before obliteration. But it wasn't meaningless. Across Earth, the speech was galvanizing resistance, undoing weeks of careful psychological warfare. Commander Thrawn suggests we delay Moscow's destruction, Admiral Corlin reported. He believes another demonstration will further unite rather than divide the resistance. Commander Thrawn is not in command here, Tarkin snapped. I am. And I will not allow primitives to dictate Imperial strategy through stubborn theatrics. Moscow burns as scheduled. Perhaps when 10 million are dead instead of 500,000, they'll understand the price of defiance. Sir, the Emperor's office has requested we await revised orders before. The Emperor gave me authority over this operation. Moscow burns. Prepare to fire in 6 hours. The order went out. Across Earth, humanity braced for another apocalypse. In Moscow, citizens gathered in Red Square, holding candles, singing songs, and waiting for the end with a dignity that would have moved even the most hardened observer. But in Kazakhstan, Dr. Sarah Chen was staring at calculations that made no sense. The Death Star's energy signature. It's not just charging the super laser. There's a secondary power drain, massive, going to. I don't know what. It's not weapon systems. It's not shields. It's like they're powering something else entirely while preparing to fire. Yuki leaned over her shoulder, checking the data. Could be internal systems. Life support for a station that size would require. No. This is different. This is new. Sarah pulled up every scan they'd taken of the Death Star since its arrival. Look. The power signature's been building gradually over days. Whatever this is, it's not related to firing the super laser. It's something else. Something they're preparing while we're all focused on Moscow. Marcus caught her meaning. You think Moscow's a diversion. I think Moscow's a threat to keep our attention. But the real danger is something we haven't seen yet. And in the Death Star's secure command levels, in chambers no Earth satellite had penetrated, Imperial technicians worked on systems that had nothing to do with planetary destruction. Systems designed for something far more ambitious than conquering one world. 5 hours until Moscow's scheduled annihilation. And Earth was about to discover that the Death Star's superlaser was the least of their worries. The discovery came from an unexpected source. Operative Jens Marek, the captured Imperial technician who'd spent days cooperating with Earth's scientists, suddenly went rigid in his chair during a routine debriefing. His eyes widened with recognition as he stared at Dr. Chen's energy signature analysis of the Death Star. "No," he whispered. "No, they wouldn't. Not on an inhabited world. The protocols specifically forbid." "Marek?" Sarah leaned forward, sensing his genuine terror. "What are you seeing?" "That secondary power drain. I know what it is." His voice shook. "It's the planetary tractor array. The Death Star doesn't just destroy planets, it can move them. Or more precisely, it can lock onto a planet's gravitational field and manipulate its orbital trajectory." The room fell silent as the implications crystallized. "You're saying," Marcus spoke slowly, working through the physics, "they're not planning to destroy Earth. They're planning to move it." "Through the spatial anomaly," Marek confirmed. "Back to their galaxy. The Emperor doesn't want to conquer Earth in the Milky Way, he wants to physically relocate it into Imperial space, where it can be integrated permanently into the Empire's infrastructure. No escape route. No hiding in distant star systems. Earth becomes just another Imperial world, billions of light years from where it started." Sarah's mind raced. How long would that take? The calculations are complex, but moving a planetary mass through a spatial anomaly without tearing it apart? At least 72 hours of sustained tractor field operation. They'd need to stabilize Earth's rotation, synchronize with the anomaly's gravitational fluctuations, and then gradually phase the planet through dimensional barriers. Marek pulled up technical specifications from memory. The Moscow strike, it's not about punishment. It's about eliminating the largest concentration of resistance leadership before the relocation begins. Once Earth is in their galaxy, surrounded by Imperial fleets with no spatial anomaly to escape through, resistance becomes literally impossible. "Can we stop it?" Yuki asked. "The tractor array is powered by the Death Star's primary reactor. You'd need to either destroy the reactor, which would require penetrating the battle station's defenses, or disrupt the tractor field at the planetary level, which would require," Marek trailed off, calculating. "You'd need to generate a countergravitational field equivalent to roughly 12% of Earth's mass. That's beyond any technology your species possesses." Sarah stared at the data, her exhausted mind pushing through fear towards something resembling a plan. What if we don't try to match their technology? What if we use physics against them? "I'm listening," Marcus said skeptically. "The Death Star is using gravitational manipulation to move Earth. Gravity is just warped spacetime. And we know that spatial anomaly connecting our galaxies is already gravitationally unstable, that's why the Empire had trouble navigating it initially. What if we destabilize it further? Make it so volatile that attempting to pull Earth through would tear the planet apart? That would kill everyone just as effectively as the super laser," Marcus pointed out. "Not if we collapse the anomaly completely," Sarah countered. "Close the door between galaxies. Strand the Imperial fleet here in the Milky Way, cut off from reinforcements and supply lines. They'd still have superior technology, but we'd have home territory advantage and they'd have no way back." Marek's expression shifted from terror to calculation. "The anomaly is held open by exotic matter injections from the Imperial side. If you could disrupt that process, introduce chaotic variables into the gravitational equation, yes. Yes, it might collapse. But you'd need to act from inside the anomaly itself, at the precise moment of maximum instability. Which would be when they activate the planetary tractor. The energy requirements for moving an entire world will destabilize every gravitational field within 10 light-years. That's your window. Sarah turned to her team. We need to get this information to Alliance Command. And we need a ship, anything capable of reaching the anomaly's location. A suicide mission into the heart of the instability zone. Earth barely has functional spacecraft, Yuki said. The International Space Station, a few satellites, some experimental vehicles. Nothing rated for the gravitational forces you're describing. Then we use what the Empire gave us. Sarah gestured toward the captured Imperial shuttle, the same craft Captain Sarn had used to land at the UN months ago, though it felt like years. We've been studying it, reverse engineering its systems. It's not space-worthy by our standards, but it doesn't need to be. It just needs to reach the anomaly. And do what exactly? Overload its reactor core at the moment of maximum gravitational instability. Create a catastrophic explosion precisely calibrated to introduce chaos into the exotic matter matrix sustaining the anomaly. Sarah's voice was steady, though her hands trembled. It'll collapse the connection between galaxies. Strand the Empire here. And give Earth a fighting chance. It's a one-way trip, Marcus said quietly. Whoever pilots that shuttle dies. I know. In Moscow, 4 hours remained until scheduled destruction. President Volkov had been informed of Dr. Chen's discovery and the proposed counter-operation. He stood in the Kremlin's war room, surrounded by military advisors, facing the most complex strategic decision in human history. If we collapse the anomaly, we save Earth from relocation but strand thousands of Imperial personnel in our galaxy, General Yang summarized. Including the Death Star, 5 Star Destroyers, and approximately 150,000 stormtroopers already deployed planetside. Can we defeat them without reinforcements? Volkov asked. Eventually. It would take years. Decades, maybe. But cut off from the Empire's industrial base, unable to repair losses or resupply, they'd gradually weaken. And we'd learn from every engagement, reverse engineer more of their technology, close the capability gap. Liang's expression was grim. It would be the longest war in human history. But it would be winnable. And if we don't collapse the anomaly, Earth gets dragged into their galaxy. 8 billion humans permanently relocated to Imperial space, surrounded by millions of Imperial worlds, with no possibility of escape or outside assistance. Resistance would continue, but ultimate defeat would be inevitable. The choice was stark, a horrific war with hope of eventual victory, or slow suffocation under eternal occupation. Volkov made his decision. Contact Dr. Chen. Tell her Russia approves the operation. And tell her that whoever volunteers for that suicide mission will be remembered as the person who saved humanity's future. The message reached Kazakhstan within minutes. Sarah had been expecting it, hoping for it, dreading it. She turned to her team, the men and women who'd worked alongside her for days without sleep, pushing human science to its absolute limits. I need a volunteer to pilot the shuttle. Silence. Not because no one was willing, but because everyone was willing and the weight of that choice paralyzed them. Finally, Marcus spoke. I'll do it. Marcus. I'm the best pilot here. I flew experimental craft for NASA before all this started. And, he smiled without humor. I don't have kids. No family waiting for me. Some of you do. This should be me. Sarah wanted to argue, but the logic was undeniable. She pulled Marcus into a brief, fierce embrace. You'll be remembered. Humanity will know what you did. Make sure they also know why I did it, Marcus replied. Not for glory. Not for revenge. Just because someone had to, and I could. The captured Imperial shuttle was loaded with every explosive device, every power cell, every piece of unstable technology Earth scientists could pack into it. The reactor had been modified to overload on command, creating a cascade failure that would release enough energy to disrupt the exotic matter matrix, theoretically. Aboard the Death Star, Grand Moff Tarkin was unaware of the desperate gambit being prepared. His attention was focused entirely on Moscow's impending destruction and the planetary tractor activation sequence. "Status," he demanded. "Superlaser charged and ready, Governor. Target locked on Moscow city center. And the tractor array has reached 85% power. We can begin the relocation process immediately after firing." "Excellent. Inform Commander Thrawn that his concerns about native psychology are irrelevant. After today, Earth will be in our galaxy, and resistance will be a historical footnote." Tarkin checked his chronometer. "Fire on Moscow in 1 hour. Begin planetary tractor activation in 90 minutes. The Emperor will be pleased." But Emperor Palpatine, sitting in his throne room on Coruscant billions of light-years away, was not pleased. He'd sensed something through the Force, a disturbance, a pivot point, a moment where the future hung in balance. The natives of that distant world were more than primitives. They were dangerous in ways that transcended military capability. He sent an urgent communication to Tarkin: delay operations. Await further assessment. The message would take hours to reach the Death Star through the quantum entanglement network. Hours they didn't have. In Kazakhstan, Marcus climbed into the Imperial shuttle's pilot's seat, familiarizing himself with controls that had been partially decoded through weeks of study. The craft's systems hummed with alien power, responsive and strange. "Communication check," Sarah's voice crackled through the improvised radio. "We're reading your systems green. Course plotted to the anomaly. You'll need to reach the exact center of the gravitational instability. Our calculations put it approximately 200,000 kilometers from Earth, right at the anomaly's throat." "Understood. And the timing?" "The moment the Death Star activates its planetary tractor, you'll see gravitational readings spike across your sensors. Wait 30 seconds for maximum instability, then trigger the overload. The explosion needs to happen at the precise moment when the anomaly is most vulnerable." "And if I miss the timing?" Silence. They both knew the answer. Miss the timing, and the explosion would be meaningless. Earth would be relocated. Humanity would lose its last chance. "Don't miss," Sarah said finally. Marcus laughed, a sound edged with hysteria and acceptance. "No pressure then. Okay. Beginning launch sequence." The shuttle lifted from the Kazakh steppe, its repulsor lift engines carrying it skyward with impossible smoothness. Earth fell away beneath him, blue and green and beautiful, a world worth dying for. He angled toward the coordinates Sarah had provided, pushing the shuttle to maximum speed. Around him, space was empty except for the Death Star's menacing bulk and the distant glimmer of the spatial anomaly that connected two galaxies. Aboard the subjugator, sensors detected the shuttle's launch. "Sir, we have an unauthorized Imperial craft departing from the surface. Course heading toward the spatial anomaly." Thrawn's eyes narrowed. "They're not fleeing. They're attacking. Intercept immediately, dispatch TIE fighters. That shuttle cannot reach the anomaly." But the order came seconds too late. Marcus was already accelerating beyond interception range, the shuttle's stolen Imperial engines outpacing Earth's primitive spacecraft by orders of magnitude. In Moscow, with 30 minutes remaining until scheduled destruction, President Volkov addressed the city one final time. "Whatever happens in the next hour will determine humanity's future. If we fail, Moscow burns and Earth becomes the Empire's property. If we succeed, we'll have bought ourselves a war, but a war we can win. Either way, we faced the impossible with courage. And that, more than any weapon, is what makes us human." Marcus reached the anomaly. Up close, it was terrifying, a wound in reality itself, spacetime folded in ways that hurt to perceive. Gravitational forces pulled at the shuttle from impossible directions. His instruments screamed warnings. "I'm in position," he transmitted. "Waiting for the signal." Aboard the Death Star, Tarkin gave the order. Fire on Moscow. And activate planetary tractor, full power. Two things happened simultaneously. The super laser fired, its green beam lancing toward Earth. And the Death Star's tractor array engaged, gravitational forces powerful enough to move worlds reaching out to grip Earth in an invisible fist. Every gravitational sensor in the solar system went haywire. The spatial anomaly convulsed, exotic matter churning, reality itself straining under forces it was never meant to contain. Now. Sarah screamed across the radio. Marcus, now. Marcus's hand slammed down on the overload trigger. The shuttle's reactor went critical. For one terrible instant, it contained energy equivalent to a small star. Then it exploded, right in the throat of the anomaly, at the exact moment of maximum gravitational instability. The explosion didn't destroy the anomaly, it murdered it. Exotic matter matrices collapsed. Dimensional barriers that had been carefully maintained shattered. The connection between galaxies, already strained by the Death Star's tractor field, simply ceased to exist. The spatial anomaly collapsed in a cascade of gravitational chaos that propagated outward at the speed of light. On Earth, Moscow's skyline erupted in green fire as the Death Star's superlaser struck. 10 million people had evacuated. 3 million had not. But even as the city burned, something impossible happened. The Death Star's tractor field, already engaged, already pulling Earth toward the now non-existent anomaly, suddenly had nowhere to direct its energy. The gravitational forces, with no destination, fed back into the Death Star's systems. Alarms screamed across the battle station. Governor, we're experiencing catastrophic tractor field feedback. The anomaly, it's gone. It's collapsed completely. Tarkin stared in disbelief as his instruments confirmed the impossible. The portal back to their galaxy had vanished. They were stranded. Cut off. Alone in an alien galaxy with a hostile species that had just demonstrated they could outsmart Imperial technology. Impossible, he whispered. But in the ruins of what had been Moscow, among the 3 million dead and the 7 million who survived, humanity knew it wasn't impossible. They'd done it. They'd closed the door. The Galactic Empire was trapped in the Milky Way. And the real war was about to begin. The silence in the Death Star's command center was absolute. Grand Moff Tarkin stood frozen, staring at sensor displays that showed nothing where the spatial anomaly had been. No gravitational signature. No exotic matter readings. No dimensional instability. Just empty space, and a debris field that had been an Imperial shuttle moments before. Confirm sensor readings, he ordered, his voice tight. Confirmed, Governor, Admiral Corlin replied, his face pale. The anomaly has collapsed completely. No residual traces. The connection to our galaxy is gone. Restore it. Sir, we don't have the technology. The anomaly was a natural phenomenon that we stabilized with exotic matter injections from the other side. Without access to our galaxy's infrastructure, without the stabilization equipment on the other end, Corlin trailed off, the implications too enormous to articulate. Thrawn arrived on the bridge within minutes, his expression unreadable. Assessment? We're stranded, Tarkin said flatly. 5 Star Destroyers, 1 Death Star, 150,000 ground personnel, and perhaps 2 months of supplies before we need to requisition resources locally. We cannot return home. We cannot receive reinforcements. We are alone in an alien galaxy facing a hostile population of 8 billion primitives who just demonstrated they're willing to suicide attack our infrastructure. Not primitives anymore. Thrawn corrected quietly. They learned. Adapted. Used our own technology against us in ways we didn't anticipate. That takes intelligence and courage, a dangerous combination. Tarkin's jaw tightened. Then we destroy them. Completely. The Emperor's orders to integrate this population are irrelevant if we cannot return to report success. We use the Death Star to systematically eliminate resistance. City by city. Continent by continent. Until nothing remains but radioactive ruins and the survivors beg for the mercy of serving as our labor force. That would take years, Thrawn observed. And every day we commit to that strategy is a day they're learning more about our technology, reverse engineering our equipment, and closing the capability gap. Within a decade, they might achieve parity. Within 2, they could surpass us. We're a fixed force with no supply chain, while they have an entire planet's industrial base and 8 billion minds working the problem. What do you suggest? Tarkin demanded. Negotiation. After what they did. I suggest we recognize reality. We cannot conquer Earth through destruction, we lack the resources for sustained bombardment of a planet this size. We cannot leave, we have nowhere to go. And we cannot simply occupy, the resistance has proven too organized and too willing to die. Thrawn studied the planetary display. We have one option, become part of this galaxy permanently. Absurd. Practical. Governor, we represent the full military might of the Galactic Empire, but we're cut off from that empire. We can either spend decades trying to subjugate a species that has proven ungovernable, exhausting ourselves in the process, or we can negotiate a settlement that preserves our forces and gives us a position of influence in this new galaxy. Thrawn's eyes glinted. The Empire is gone, Governor. But we remain. The question is whether we die as Imperial officers enforcing orders from an Emperor who will never know our fate. Or live as founders of something new. Tarkin's expression was murderous. But he was also a realist. He turned to his tactical officers. Casualty assessment. Current conflict. Moscow strike, 3 million dead. Global occupation casualties, approximately 120,000 civilian dead, 8,000 stormtrooper casualties. Ongoing insurgency operations, 300 Imperial personnel killed daily, with that number increasing as natives acquire more of our equipment. 300 dead per day. In a year, that would be over 100,000 casualties, nearly their entire ground force. And they had no reinforcements coming. Ever. Open a channel to Earth's leadership, Tarkin ordered, each word painful. All frequencies. I will address their Terra Defense Alliance. On Earth, President Hartley received the transmission request in the Emergency Command Center now operating from a bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. Around her, military advisors and the surviving Alliance leadership, scattered across a dozen nations, watched via secure video links. It could be a trap, General Yang warned. Another psychological operation. Or it could be acknowledgement of reality, Colonel Wei countered. They're stranded. We're not defeated. That changes everything. Hartley made her decision. Accept the transmission. Let's hear what the Empire has to say now that they can't go home. Tarkin's gaunt face appeared on screens across the Alliance command network. His expression was controlled, but fatigue showed in the lines around his eyes, the exhaustion of a man watching his certainties crumble. President Hartley. Alliance leadership. I am Grand Moff Tarkin, commander of Imperial forces in your galaxy. I will be direct. The spatial anomaly has been destroyed by your forces. We cannot return to our galaxy. Continuation of current hostilities serves neither our interests nor yours. I propose a cessation of military operations and negotiations for a permanent settlement. Hartley's voice was cold. You murdered 3.5 million people. You destroyed 2 of our greatest cities. You invaded our world with the explicit intention of enslaving our species. And now that you're trapped here, you want to negotiate. Yes. The bluntness was almost shocking. No justification. No propaganda about imperial order. Just acknowledgement of pragmatic reality. Why would we negotiate? Hartley pressed. You're cut off from supply. We have you outnumbered 1,000 to 1. Time is on our side. Every day, we learn more about your technology. Every week, more of your soldiers die in occupation zones they can't hold. We can outlast you. You can, Tarkin agreed. But the cost would be catastrophic. We possess the Death Star. I could spend the next decade systematically destroying every major population center on your planet. You would win eventually, but billions would die first. Or we can end this now. Establish terms that allow both sides to survive. What terms? Tarkin glanced at Thrawn, who stepped forward on the transmission. Complete withdrawal of all Imperial occupation forces to designated zones. We propose Antarctica and several uninhabited Pacific islands. Technology transfer agreements that give you access to Imperial knowledge in exchange for resources and industrial support to maintain our equipment. Joint security arrangements against external threats. Your galaxy is not empty, and you know nothing of the dangers that exist beyond your solar system. And autonomy. We do not attempt to govern Earth. You do not attempt to eliminate us. Separate but coexisting populations. President Hartley muted the transmission, turning to her advisors. Opinions? It's a trick, General Morrison said immediately. The moment we let them consolidate in territory of their choosing, they'll rebuild and attack again. Maybe, Hartley acknowledged. Or maybe they're genuinely trapped and looking for a way to survive that doesn't involve mutual annihilation. General Young. The technology transfer alone would be worth considering, Liang said thoughtfully. Hyperspace capability, energy weapons, medical technology, if we can gain that through negotiation rather than decades of war, millions of lives are saved. Colonel Wei added, and they're right about external threats. We've barely explored our own solar system. We have no idea what else exists in this galaxy. Imperial military expertise could be valuable. Hartley unmuted the transmission. Here are our terms. Complete disarmament of the Death Star. We're not living under a weapon that can destroy planets. Withdrawal to designated zones under international observation. Full technology transfer with no restrictions. War Crimes Tribunal for officers responsible for the attacks on New York and Moscow. And permanent oversight by Earth Defense Forces. You become refugees we're choosing to shelter, not conquerors we're accommodating. Tarkin's expression hardened. Unacceptable. Disarming the Death Star leaves us defenseless. And I will not submit Imperial officers to trial by primitives. We're not primitives, Hartley interrupted. We collapsed your spatial anomaly. We survived your superweapon. We fought your empire to a standstill. You're the ones asking for terms, Governor. These are ours. Accept them, or we continue this war until your forces are extinct. The transmission held intense silence. Behind Tarkin, Thrawn leaned close and whispered urgently. The governor's jaw worked, pride warring with pragmatism. Finally, he spoke. The Death Star's superlaser will be disabled but not dismantled. It remains our property but incapable of planetary destruction. We accept technology transfer and territorial restrictions. But there will be no War Crimes Tribunal. Imperial command authority remains intact within our designated zones. And we require assurances of protection. If Earth decides to eliminate us after we've disarmed, we have no recourse. You'll have the same recourse any population has, international law and mutual defense agreements, Hartley replied. We're not monsters, Governor. We don't exterminate refugees, even ones who tried to conquer us. But you'll live under our terms, not yours. That's the price of survival. Tarkin closed his eyes briefly, a gesture that looked like acceptance of defeat. Agreed. We will begin withdrawal from occupied territories immediately. Negotiations for formal terms can begin within 72 hours. The transmission ended. In command centers across Earth, exhaustion and disbelief competed for dominance. Had they actually done it? Had humanity fought a galactic empire to a negotiated peace? President Hartley looked at the faces of her advisors. men and women who'd aged years and weeks, who'd made impossible decisions that saved billions and killed millions. "We won," she said quietly. "Not the way we hoped. Not without terrible cost. But we won." In Moscow's ruins, survivors emerged from shelters to find their city transformed into a monument of blackened stone and melted steel. 3 million were gone. But 7 million remained, and they rebuilt with fury in their hearts and determination in their hands. The crater where Red Square had been would become a memorial, the largest in human history, honoring those who died defending Earth's freedom. In Kazakhstan, Dr. Sarah Chin stood in the facility where Marcus had made his last transmission, staring at the empty pilot's chair. He'd saved humanity with a suicide run that lasted 3 minutes. Monuments would be built. His name would be remembered forever. But right now, all she felt was the crushing absence of a friend who'd volunteered to die so others could live. "We'll make it count," she whispered to the empty room. "Everything you gave us, we'll make it count." In Antarctica, Imperial Star Destroyers descended toward the ice, beginning the long process of establishing a permanent settlement in territory no human nation claimed. 150,000 stormtroopers, officers, and Imperial personnel prepared to spend the rest of their lives on a world that was not home, among a species that would never fully trust them, building something neither empire nor defeat but simply survival. Commander Thrawn watched Earth rotate beneath his viewport, this strange blue world that had accomplished the impossible. "They'll surpass us within a generation," he told Lieutenant Then. "Access to our technology combined with their innovative capacity, they'll reach the stars not as subjects of the Empire but as an independent power." "Does that concern you, sir?" Thrawn almost smiled. "No. It interests me. We came to conquer and instead became refugees. But perhaps that's not the end of the story. Perhaps it's the beginning of something neither the Empire nor Earth could have achieved alone, a fusion of Imperial discipline and human innovation. This galaxy's first true interstellar civilization. You make defeat sound like opportunity. Because it is. The Empire we served is gone, Lieutenant. But we remain. And this world, this impossible, stubborn, brilliant world, remains. What we build together might just be worth more than what we lost." 6 months later, the first human spacecraft equipped with reverse-engineered Imperial hyperdrive left Earth's orbit, crewed by a joint human-Imperial team. Its mission, explore the Milky Way, catalog potential threats, and establish humanity's presence among the stars. On its hull, painted in both English and Orbesh script, was a simple motto: Earth endures. Not conquered. Not destroyed. Not subjugated. Enduring. And in the ruins of Moscow, beneath a monument to 3 million dead, a plaque bore words that President Volkov had spoken before the city burned. "We are stubborn. Unreasonable. Impossibly defiant. That is what makes us human. That is why we survive." The Galactic Empire had come to Earth expecting easy conquest. They found instead a species that would rather die than kneel, that could adapt faster than empires could plan, that turned defeat into opportunity and occupation into negotiation. Earth had been discovered by an empire. But Earth had not been conquered. And in the long span of galactic history, that distinction would matter more than anyone could yet imagine. The war that was supposed to last hours stretched into months of brutal occupation and desperate resistance. The empire that came to subjugate found itself trapped in an alien galaxy, cut off from home, facing a species that refused to accept defeat even when extinction seemed inevitable. And in the end, neither side achieved the victory they sought, but both sides survived. Earth paid a terrible price: 3.5 million dead, 2 cities reduced to radioactive craters, and a world forever changed by the knowledge that they were not alone in the universe. But humanity also gained something invaluable: access to technology that would have taken centuries to develop independently, hard-won knowledge of galactic threats beyond their solar system, and proof that human courage could matter against impossible odds. The Galactic Empire's forces, stranded permanently in the Milky Way, lost everything that defined them: connection to their emperor, their mission of galactic domination, and their certainty that overwhelming force could conquer any resistance. But they gained something unexpected, a second chance to build something beyond empire, a partnership born from necessity that might evolve into something neither conquest nor defeat but genuine coexistence. The Death Star remains in orbit, its superlaser disabled but its presence a reminder of how close Earth came to annihilation. Imperial settlements in Antarctica operate under international oversight, contributing technical expertise while adapting to their permanent exile. And above Earth, ships bearing both human and Imperial crews venture into the unknown reaches of the Milky Way, exploring a galaxy that belongs to neither Empire nor Earth but to whatever future they build together. History would remember this not as Earth's conquest, but as humanity's refusal, the moment when 8 billion humans faced extinction and chose defiance over submission, ingenuity over despair, and survival on their own terms over peace through subjugation. The Galactic Empire came to destroy Earth. Instead, Earth destroyed the only thing that mattered, the Empire's certainty that power was sufficient to command obedience. And in that destruction, both worlds found something neither expected, a future where survival required cooperation, where former enemies became reluctant allies, and where the price of freedom was measured not in victory but in the courage to endure.